how to make employees actual assets instead of just an expense on your financials. That's what we're talking about today. My name is Jacob Curtis. I am the founder of Curtis Accounting Solutions and the co-owner of Utah Valley Quilting. And I'd love to hear your comments, your questions about how to effectively delegate and create a team that really does support you and the business. And there's really 5 elements to that. But before we jump into those five elements, let's kind of tell me if this sounds familiar to you, right? Most of us, when we get started, we hire people, we become frustrated that no one really seems to understand the job the way that you do it, right? And we often admit that we're probably pretty terrible at delegating and getting things to work the way we want to, but we don't really ever see or figure out a better or an effective way to get it to delegate. And so we just continue to do what we're doing. And there's usually one of two things kind of happens. We hand over everything, and after a few weeks or months or something, we take it all back and say, you're not doing it right, we got to do it this way, and you take it back as the owner, or that employee gets really frustrated with the way that we've assigned it or delegated it to them, and they end up leaving, right? And which then again puts it back onto you. Or even the third way possibly is the employee just comes to you every time they get a problem. Every time there's an issue, they have a question, they don't know what to do, they just come and ask you, and you end up doing all of the decision making. You end up basically doing the job or that process through them, because they just don't feel like they can come to you, and they don't feel like they have to come to you. They feel like they have to come to you, and they don't feel like they can solve it themselves. And so that's usually kind of one of the 3 camps that ends up happening as business owners is we're not fully empowering our employees, our team members, to actually do their jobs, to own the results, to own the process, and to really do what you intended and have them fully own and operate those that job, that business, and inside the business, I should say. So there are 5 guidelines or areas that we need to be aware of to successfully delegate to the teams. The very first one may seem pretty obvious and simple, but it is match the job to the right person. Right? So when you're delegating a responsibility for a function in your business, the first step is to really create a scorecard or description of the skills and abilities and qualities necessary to perform that function successfully. So write it out, right? So for example, maybe you have an administrative assistant you're looking to hire for. Well, what are some of those skills and abilities that you are looking for in an administrative assistant? Maybe that's the ability to use cloud-based technology, or a scheduling experience, or clear written communicating skills, or verbal skills. And some of the qualities you may be looking for, maybe they have a flexible schedule, or they're highly organized, they're calm under pressure, right? They're detail oriented. Maybe they're friendly, they have a nice sense of humor. Those are the kind of things you want to list down. Actually, physically write them down as if you're writing a job description. Okay? That way you can look at your current team and say, do I have anybody that fits this kind of description? And if they do, maybe we put them in there. Now the second, and so I guess, once you've got that all figured out, you want to make sure you've got the right person doing that right job, or hire the person. If you look at your team and you don't actually have anybody that fills that description, and doesn't have the bandwidth or something, maybe you actually hire for somebody. You're looking for those specific skills, abilities, and qualities that will enable them to really thrive and do that job well. Point number two is to provide excellent training. Now, many of us fall at one end of the spectrum, of the following spectrum, right? We either hand over the function to the employees with minimal instructions and assume they just know they have the skill level to figure it out and perform the function as up to our specs, up to our satisfaction standards. Or 2, we're that micromanager, right? Every single step of the way. So the employee really can't get in there and make a single decision on their own. And the owner is just as busy as before, right? The whole goal of hiring a team and getting a team is to delegate and provide tasks out. And so typically we fall in one of those 2 camps. Either we just say, go do this job without any further instructions, assuming they can figure it out. Or 2, we're just on top of them all the time, right? And both of those are not great. 1, if you're micromanaging, that means you didn't free up any of your time, because you're basically just doing the same job but having them move their hands. In the first one, where you just dump them on them to go say, hey, go and do it up to my standards, you're not giving them any kind of guidelines or anything like that, which means they're not going to be able to even come close to what your standards are. There are obviously exceptions to all these rules, but the exceptions usually prove out the rule. So a more effective way to really delegate is to make sure that you give your employees all the tools and information that they need to perform that task successfully. And depending on that task, this could involve maybe a written step-by-step instructions, maybe a video instructions for complicated tasks, maybe a checklist of things to go through, maybe strategies on how to troubleshoot when there are problems. All of those things would be super helpful in delegating to an employee. The third idea is really focus on the result and let go of the need to control that process. Often as business owners, we're the ones that came up with that process. We developed it, we figured it out, and now what we need to do is empower our employees to take ownership of that function by clearly communicating the results that we want to achieve. Maybe not the necessary path or the way. You can definitely provide those, and like I mentioned in the previous step, but hammer in and make it a point to make sure that you are actually looking for this result. And this is the process you've used to get that result, and it's proven so far, but don't let them think that that's the only way to do it, right? For example, if you're designing a process to handle customer complaints or something, ask yourself, what is the end result or the ultimate experience that you want your customers to walk away with, right? This ultimate experience might be that the customer should feel safe, that they're treated fairly and with respect and things like that. The goal of an employee handling that customer complaint is therefore that customer felt that they were treated fairly. Like the ultimate goal is that the customer felt like they were treated fairly and with respect. Okay, you might need to give the employee a little bit of leeway and to empower them and help them to figure out what it is they need to do. Maybe they don't need to follow the exact customer process that you've set up, because they can read that situation and understand the situation better than, and following that process wouldn't make it better, wouldn't make them reach the ultimate goal of being fairly treated and respected. So you got to give that employee a little bit of empowerment, a little bit of leeway to follow the process, but also to the potential improvement of that process overall, to make the decisions that will actually end up in a better situation, right? In the case of the customer feeling that they were fairly treated and respected, that's really important. But that ultimate experience is kind of what you're looking for. And so it's important that during your reviews of your employees and talking with them and sitting with them, you don't tell the employee what to do or exactly what to do, but you can give them a framework, but you don't tell them exactly what they do, or you don't tell them, or you don't reprimand them for not achieving the results you expected. That's typically where we go to first. You didn't do XYZ, you're in trouble. You didn't get your bonus. You're not going to get that raise, right? Instead, let's ask the employee for their input on the specific situations, or on a situation and how they believe they could have achieved better results, or how they could have done it better or differently. Usually we want to ask them for their input and help them brainstorm ideas with them of how to actually do that better. Encourage them to take the initiative and to take that step forward to make sure that they can feel empowered and with more tools to actually achieve the result you're looking for. Okay, make sure you highlight what they did really well in these situations, and making sure that you also understand that they understand that there are a few issues that they need to improve on. Okay, but we want to really focus in on bring in them in the conversation and say, I don't think you handled that well. What can we do? And that goes with not just customer service, but with all aspects of the business. Whether they're out cutting yards of fabric, they're stocking shelves, they're fulfilling orders in the back room. What are some of the things they could do to really improve that? Empower your employees. Making sure that you understand helping them understand what the end result is that you're shooting for, and that will help your employees understand what they should be working towards. Which comes down to the next one, which is clearly communicate any constraints or boundaries. So even though you may empower them to make the customer feel great or to whatever their job is, you want to make sure that they are staying within the bounds of where they need to be, right? If there are any actions that you want them to take, that they have to take, make sure that your employees know exactly, okay, you have to do this. You always have to put in a coupon for 20% off on every online order, or you have to make sure you cut at least an extra inch on every yard to make sure that when they go to, we didn't mess them up. We didn't cut too little yardage, right? For example, in that handling that customer care complaints, maybe you should specify certain responses that are never acceptable and specific remedies that are never available, right? Like, we don't want a customer to come in and be all upset that we didn't square up a thing and then be like, well, here's 10 more free yards, right? Maybe that's not an acceptable remedy. And so you want to make sure you know exactly that your employees know those constraints, those boundaries that are never acceptable, and kind of build in that framework, give them some guardrails that they can work in and figure out where they need to be. Teach them that solution of, okay, start here and move here, knowing that this is the ceiling, you can't go above and beyond that. And then finally, the last point, the fifth point, is to clearly articulate your mission, your vision, and your priorities with the team. That's probably the biggest key. It goes back to just not achieving that result in that single process or that single task, but what is the overall goal of the business? What are we working for? What is the business working for? And that's what's going to be super key to help make sure that you and your team are all on the same page. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. I'd love to talk to you about those. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest. You can find me on my website. I have a great guide to help with guide to effective delegation for your employees at curtiscountlingsolutions.com/resources. And lastly, I want you to be aware of, you can go to curtiscountlingsolutions.com/events. We have an event coming up on August 25th. We're going to be talking about the secrets the profitable secrets that the successful use every day, dealing with inventory and products mix. So I would love to see you there. Thanks, and have a great day. Bye.